Amen. Please grab a seat. Hey, I want to just real quick say publicly how grateful I am for our worship team. They do a phenomenal job. Ethan, your leadership, Alyssa, to everybody, phenomenal job. And that includes the people in the back of the room that you never see because without them, it just doesn't happen. And it's funny because the only time we think about people in the back of the room is when there's a mistake. But most weeks they do an outstanding job every week. And I am just honored and proud to serve with them. And if you serve on this team, thank you so much. God's using you every single week. This morning, we're beginning a brand new series. But before I jump into that, one thing I almost forgot, we have just gotten a special agreement with LA Fitness. And so starting next Sunday, this is going to be open for 3 months. You can actually pick up a voucher here, one voucher per person, 18 years old and older. If you've ever thought about joining a gym, changing a gym, they are waiving the $99 join fee and created a special rate for C3. And so why am I talking about that? Because a lot of you think in January, and you eat like a pig in November, you bust the gut in December. Hey, imagine what would happen if you got a jump start on this. So if you've ever thought about maybe I need to join the gym, or if you've never thought about maybe I need to join the gym, this is for you. And so next Sunday, you'll be able to start getting those vouchers, and they've opened that up. That's going to be available November, December, and January. But why not get a jump start on your health and think about how much happier you'll be in January. And by the way, with this one, you can go to any LA Fitness if you travel for work or whatever. So that's something special they've worked out for us, and I am very grateful. When I was younger, one of my favorite places to go was to my grandmother's house. I was very close with my grandmother. She lived a little bit out of town on some land, and she had chickens and ducks and guineas and peacocks, and she would get a cow and raise it and feed it and slaughter it and then eat it, because that's what you do in Texas, and that's what real men do. And so I loved growing up. I loved going to see her. We were super close, and although I loved her very much, there was one thing she did that annoyed the junk out of me. From the time I was little, I would ride with my parents, obviously, and then when I was old enough to drive, I would drive myself out there. I'd go see her at least once a week, spend 2 weeks out there every summer, and every time I would go, when I got in the car to leave, she would give me directions on how to back out of the driveway. And it drove me nuts, like I've done this hundreds of times. Drove me nuts. She never stopped. I even told her in a kind way and sometimes frustrated ways, I got it. There's not even turns in the driveway, straight driveway, but you're going to give me instructions. And don't forget there's a ditch out there. And yeah, I pass it every freaking time I come here. I know it's there. And so although I loved her, that drove me nuts. This morning we're beginning a series called At the Table. And we're going to talk about difficult people in life. Whether it's the dining table, the boardroom table, the cafeteria table, the workroom table, there are people that you and I engage with, and we can't always control who's there, and some of them are incredibly difficult. For you, maybe you've had a long day at work, and you have that moment where I need a break, and you walk to the break room, and as you round the corner and go into the room, he's sitting there. And every time you engage with him, he has advice on your relationships. He has advice. Have you ever noticed how many unhealthy, out-of-shape people can tell you how to get healthy? Have you ever noticed that? Everybody's an expert. Have you ever noticed how many people that don't have kids can tell you a better way to parent? Have you ever noticed that? And he's just one of those guys, and you don't want to deal with it today, so you turn and go back to your seat. Or maybe for you, since it's November, you're already having those conversations with your spouse about Thanksgiving and who you're inviting. And there's that one uncle. And you're hoping somehow this year you can win the relational lottery. And babe, do we have to invite him? And she says the same thing every time. And so if you're like me, I start praying, maybe he'll die before Thanksgiving. He knows Jesus, it's fine. He's going to heaven, it's okay. Maybe God will just take him out. But you have those conversations, and it's always, no, we've got to invite him. Because there's some people at the table that you can't remove. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's people you work with. Sometimes it's your next door neighbor. There are people we engage with, somebody on the team, somebody in the class, that are incredibly challenging. And some people are just difficult. This morning, I want to begin in talking about one particular kind of difficult person. And as I do this, I need to tell you, this particular kind of person. There is a club, and I happen to be president of the club. I'm going to talk about control freaks for a few minutes. Have any of you ever known a control freak, right? If you've ever known a control freak, great. In fact, some of you right now, you know if you're sitting by a control freak because they're beside you and they grab your arm and put it, you're not a control freak, stop it. That's a control freak. Like we deal with them. We deal with them in life all the time. So what do we do? Because God calls us to love people. God calls us to be patient. I hate that word. God calls us to care for people. So how do we do this apart from trying to minimize our time with them, apart from trying to limit the interactions with them, because there are moments that's just not possible? When someone is going to be at your Thanksgiving table that you're not thankful for, what do you do? Controlling people bring an atmosphere of frustration and discouragement. These are the people that want you to do what they want you to do, when they want you to do it, how they want you to do it. And before I go any further, I want to talk for just a moment about what is not controlling. Because we've become very good in our culture at pulling the pin and tossing the emotional grenade and labeling people and, oh, that's a controlling person, that's a controlling person. Not everything is controlling. So let me give you some things that are not controlling in and of themselves by themselves. The first one is this. Someone that's concerned for your well-being. It's not controlling. Sometimes when people express their concern for your safety, it can be misinterpreted as controlling. For example, a friend or a family member that might check in on you frequently, especially if you're going through a tough time. They're motivated by caring for you, not trying to control you, but it can feel controlling because they're relentless. That's not controlling. Another thing that's not controlling is people who offer advice. Offering advice or suggestions can be seen as controlling, especially if the advice is unsolicited. However, a lot of people offer advice out of a genuine desire to be helpful, not to control. It's crucial to consider the intent behind the person's words or advice. 3, it's not controlling, organizational leadership. In a work setting, a manager or a boss might make decisions that affect the entire team, and often they will. And sometimes that can feel controlling. But a part of their job is to ensure that the team functions in a succinct way, effectively meeting its goals. Every single person I hire, every single person that works on our team, I have a conversation. And part of what I say to them, and the reason I say this is because at the end of the day, out of all 3 services this morning, I'm the only guy that's going to stand before God one day and give an answer for the decisions in the life of C3. And so I pay attention. I get diagnostic reports every single week. I know what's going on in every aspect in every area of the church and where we're growing, where we're struggling. I look at those issues and those things, and we have to figure out how to overcome certain things. I'm all over that. And I will weave in it. If we have a problem in an area, I'm going to make it my business, and I'm going to get all up in the middle of it. If there's something I see that's not going well, that's not called controlling, that's called leadership. And every person I hire, I say, listen, you have 3 things to consider. First of all, in everything you do, I want you to please God. Secondly, I want you to ask yourself, how would I want it done? The reason that's important is because there has to be alignment in an organization for an organization to grow and thrive. You have to all be going in the same direction. But thirdly, I want you to use the gifts you have and the personality you have to achieve that. That's just leadership. At the end of the day, somebody's responsible. And that's just leadership. The 4th thing that is not controlling in and of itself, hey students, parental guidance. Parents set rules and guidelines for their kids, and it can be perceived as controlling. However, all of those actions, all of those decisions are typically intended to guide and protect children as they grow and learn. And so if you have a parent that says, hey, you can't have your phone at the dinner table, that's not controlling, that's called healthy parenting. If you have a parent that says, hey, you have to be in at a certain time, that's not controlling. It's called teaching you responsibility and making sure that you're safe. And so we've got to be careful about these labels we toss around, because as parents, And listen, by the way, parents, the only thing you have at the end of the day, if you're a parent, all you have is influence. That's it. And when they're younger, you have a lot more influence. As they get older, your influence changes. They're making more of their own decisions, and you hope that you've parented in a way that you have a connection and they know you love them so that you still have some influence in their lives, but at the end of the day, it is their decision. How you know a parent is controlling is if they parent the same way when you're 25 that they did when you were 5. The influence has to change over time. But just being a parent and setting some guidelines and some rules for the house, that's just called healthy parenting. Another thing that's not controlling, expressing preferences. In any relationship, we have preferences. Each person has things they prefer or desires, and if we express those, that can sometimes be misinterpreted as controlling. It's natural. We all have opinions. If you have a church of 500 people, you have 3,000 opinions. It happens every time. We all have multiple opinions, and that expressing them does not necessarily mean that the person talking is trying to control the other person. Those things are not, in and of themselves, controlling. So what is controlling behavior? Let me give you some characteristics. The first one, puppet mastery. This is when a friend subtly influences your decisions by playing on your emotions, making you feel guilty for not following their advice. You become just a puppet in their play, and you lose a sense of autonomy as your strings are pulled by guilt and manipulation. That's controlling. Number 2, the stringent supervisor. Your boss insists on approving every minor detail of every part of the project, leaving you no room for creativity, no room for autonomy. It's not just about, I need to be aligned and understand the DNA and the culture of the organization or the company and make sure we're moving in this direction, but use my personality, my gifts to pull that off. No. They want you to function in every micro detail the way they want you to function. And so your creativity and your confidence are stifled as you feel trapped in a box of constant oversight, unable to grow and be successful. The third one, the lonely island effect. This happens maybe in a dating relationship or maybe in a marriage where the person you're with discourages you from spending time with your family or friends. They make you feel isolated. They make you depend on them. And you find yourself stranded on this emotional island, cut off from other lifelines of support and community that once nourished your soul. They get offended if you want to spend time with other people, saying, spending time with me should be enough. Why do you want to spend time with them? That's controlling. The fourth, fear factor. This is the colleague, the work associate, the classmate that uses veiled threats about security, if you're working with them, about even job security, to ensure you comply with their demands, keeping you on edge. So you live in a constant state of anxiety as the shadow of intimidation looms over your every decision, paralyzing your ability to act freely. They constantly toss out the veiled threats. I am a fan of the suck-egg Dallas Cowboys. And it's 3 decades of much-needed therapy and a lot of frustration. And listen, I pray every week that Jerry Jones would meet Jesus, like literally this week. Go, bye, see you later. Hope he knows Jesus. Get out of here. Listen, it is a cluster. Not long ago, he called into a radio station, and the interviewer, which, by the way, interviewers are supposed to ask hard questions. Doesn't happen a lot, but that's a separate issue. Interviewers are supposed to ask hard questions, so they asked him a legitimate question, and he got mad and threatened to have him fired. That's intimidation. That's controlling. That's not good leadership. And I'll see a counselor later. Number 5, reality twister. This is when you're in a close relationship with somebody and they deny certain events or they deny conversations that you clearly remember. And you can get to the place where you start to question your own memory, your own perception. Your grasp on reality becomes slippery as you question what happened, and I thought it was this way. I have clear memories of this, and it leaves you sort of in this fog of confusion and doubt. That's controlling behavior. The next one, the confidence crusher. This is a coworker that frequently makes sarcastic remarks about your work. with an intent of eroding your self-esteem and making you doubt your abilities. They're always there to offer. Listen, do you know those people? And maybe it's going to happen for you at Thanksgiving. Your family's around the table. It's time to pray. Do you know anybody that you could say, would you stand and lead us in a word of criticism? Because they're just always ready. They're always there. They always have it. Your self-worth crumbles like a sandcastle under the tide as the relentless criticism erodes your belief in your own abilities and your own value. The next one, love with strings attached. You see this often with parents that only show affection when their kids meet their expectations. They make their kids feel like love is conditional or love is based on their performance and how they function. And so if you're a child in this kind of family, you feel like a performer on a stage constantly striving for approval because love becomes transactional rather than a gift. Let me help you. Love is never to be transactional. Love is eternal. When love is transactional, that's called manipulation, and you're being a control freak. And parents, it is not your job. Listen, if my kids mess up, my kids disappoint me, I might be disappointed. I do not stop loving them, and I do not change my behavior toward them. You need to be consistent in showing them that love is not something you have to perform for and strive for. And by the way, thank God He doesn't love us with that kind of attitude. Imagine if God was like, you better be better, you better do better, and if you don't, I'm going to ignore you, I'm not going to pay attention to you, you're going to have the... No. That's self-controlling. The final one, safety net overload. This is the friend that always sees the danger in every situation. The person that always sees the negative that might happen. And it tends to make you feel overprotected and unable to make your own decisions. You become ensnared in this web of overprotection where the fear of the unknown begins to stifle your own growth and your independence. As a result, you feel powerless. Controllers use two primary weapons. It's called the controller's deadly duo, and the first one is threats. They might not always say it outright, but the message is crystal clear. Do what I want, or you'll regret it. Do what I want, or you'll pay for it. And they let you know, through their actions and their words, that your failure to comply will always mean punishment. It could be the boyfriend that says, if you won't do it, I'm out of here. If you loved me, you would, and so if you won't, I'm gone. Or the boss who leaves you constantly, daily, fearing for your job, keeping you on edge. It's the spouse that in every argument tosses out the threat of leaving, causing you to feel insecure and holds it like a sword over your head. Whatever the context. For the controller, threats are the weapon of choice. And if the threats don't work, they reach for guilt. They remind you, after everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Or they'll say things like, I thought we were friends, but you won't even help me with this. They'll question your integrity, your loyalty, your love, loaded with lines like, I thought you were a Christ follower. You think you're a Christ follower acting like that, treating me like that? Or you never call me. You never check on me. You know what's fascinating to me? People that say, you never call me, you never check on me, they don't either. The phone works both ways. You don't pay attention to me. I don't feel like you're giving me enough attention. They use anything they can to twist the knife. Threats and guilt. And they wield these with precision to keep you controlled and keep you doubting yourself. So what do? You're going to deal with control freaks. I'm going to deal with control freaks. What do we do? How do we navigate this? I'm a pretty simple guy. And so if I can find the clear way, the simple way, something that I can grab and easily apply to my life, and maybe working it out in my life is challenging, but the application I can see and I get it. The best way to navigate anything is to always do it the way Jesus did it. So how did Jesus deal with control freaks? Matthew chapter 16, first book in what we call the New Testament. The Bible's divided into two sections: Old Testament, creation of the world, and then moving through everything that happened before the life of Christ. 400 years of silence in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And then the New Testament, the birth of Jesus, His life, and then the church launching all the way to end time stuff. Matthew, first book in the New Testament, we drop into this story where Peter one of Jesus' closest followers, tries to control Jesus. And before we're too hard on Peter, have you ever tried to control God? God, if you do this, if you give me that promotion, God, I'll come to church every Sunday. Father, if I could just win the lottery, I'll start tithing. No, you won't. No, you won't. If you're not doing it now, you won't do it then. Because you know what I've discovered? Tithing on $1 million, that's a lot bigger number than tithing on $50,000. If you're not doing it now, you won't do it then. But that's a different message. We'll talk about it later. Matthew chapter 16. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and then he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Come at him. Get strong in Jesus' face. Never, Lord, he said. This shall never happen to you. What you just said is going to happen, Jesus, not on my watch. It's not going down like that. I won't allow that, Jesus. Jesus turned to Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. If you're dealing with someone that's controlling, if you are a controlling person, listen, you're wired like that. It's in you. You can overcome that, but it's going to be a constant battle, and you need to be fighting the battle. This is not about flipping a switch and being all of a sudden you're not controlling it all the next day. This is about progress in your life, and it may take years, but you need to be moving and have momentum in the direction of better and more healthy. But if you're dealing with somebody who's controlling, let me give you 3 insights, 3 things that can be helpful to remember. The first one is this: be clear on your purpose. Be clear on your purpose. Jesus was very clear on his purpose. The Word of God tells us he was here to seek and to save people that did not know God in a personal way. He was crystal clear. He told us who he came for and who he didn't come for. He stated very clearly, I came for the sick, not the healthy. He said, I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve. He said, I didn't come for the righteous, I came for sinners. He was crystal clear on his purpose. So my question, the obvious question, the question that you owe it to yourself to ask and answer honestly is, what is your purpose? You. What does the world get when the world gets you? What is your purpose? Why are you here on earth? To truly love those who control you. You've got to define, first of all, your purpose with clarity. And here's the key. If you're a follower of Jesus, we all have this similar purpose. Jesus said to seek and to save the lost. We all have a purpose of helping people who don't know God in a personal way find a relationship with God so they can find hope and forgiveness and purpose and meaning in their lives. We all share a common purpose, but there are individual specific purposes for each of our lives. And part of your purpose, there's something we have to consider. A purpose isn't always something that's huge. It's not always some earth-shattering mission like becoming a missionary to a third world country or discovering a cure for cancer. Often our purpose is much closer to home. Your purpose might be to love your spouse well because your spouse grew up traumatized and has never been loved well. Have you ever thought about the fact that if you married someone who's been through extreme trauma, if you married with someone who deals with a lot of baggage from life and life has been hard from them, you are the one person on earth that gets to love them in a way that's healing, and if you don't do it, nobody else will. It doesn't have to be some big grand, I'm moving across the world. Sometimes the biggest, grandest thing you can do is love people that have never been loved in a healthy way. Your purpose might be to lead your children with integrity, or to invest in this season as being diligent as a student to prepare. But remember, your purpose is not always about a job. It's about being a light wherever you go to point others to Jesus. Your purpose is not so much what you do as it is who you are in the spaces that you occupy each day of the week. So take the time to identify what matters most in your life right now. What's your purpose? And let that guide your steps in the context of loving God and loving others. I'm extremely clear on my purpose. It's to love my bride Angie, to lead my children when they were younger to know Jesus and live for him, And now that they're older, to leverage my influence in their lives as adults to follow Jesus daily and live their best life. But they get to decide. It's also to pastor this church. It's something God has called me to, not something I picked. But to pastor this church and to lead us not where we want to go, but where we need to go. To reach as many people as we possibly can. To bring hope to the hopeless and help to the helpless by helping people connect with Jesus in a very personal way. Be clear on your purpose. And one thing brings fog to the clarity and hinders our purpose in profound ways. And it is this: we are people pleasers. We're people pleasers. In almost every decision, in every moment, every circumstance, we tend to deliberately and almost automatically focus on what other people think. If I say this, they'll think that. If I do this, they'll think that. If I hang out with these people, they're going to think they're going to think about me. When they think about, they're going to think. And when you put people's opinions ahead of God's purpose for you, that's called idolatry. People pleasing is idolatry. And some of you are so good at it. You could teach seminars. You think so much and you worry so much and you're so conflicted inside about what people think about you. There is great freedom. Listen. I want people to like me, but it's not the goal of my life. There is great freedom in, I don't give a rip. Like, I want you to, but if you don't, like, I'll go home and take a baby aspirin and sleep just fine. Like, we're going to be good. There's great freedom in that, but you get it not. And when you focus so much on what people think, it can become so all-consuming, you never think about what God thinks. And He's the one that created you and wired you and actually knows the best purpose for your life to give you and help you live the best life. Know your purpose, because purpose creates clarity. The control freak has a problem. But so do you if you allow it to consistently happen. Only you can stop it. So be clear on your purpose. Second step, spot the strings before they're pulled. Spot the strings before they're pulled. Jesus lays out His purpose. He says, this is why I'm here. This is God's will to give my life and to be raised from the dead. And Peter jumps in His face, trying to seize control, and says, no, that's never going to happen. Now think about this. Was Peter the worst person ever? No, not at all. Did Peter hate Jesus? Absolutely not. Did he set out to distract Jesus from God's plan? No, not even close. In fact, Peter was a devoted follower of Jesus who genuinely loved Jesus. You might remember before this happened, Peter hits the mark in what you might call Jesus' Jeopardy, where Jesus is asking the disciples, who do you say that I am? And they're tossing out a bunch of answers, and they're all getting it wrong until He turns to Peter and says, who do you say that I am? And Peter nails it. He says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus affirms Peter and says, Peter, that wasn't revealed to you by human wisdom, but by my Father in heaven. Peter was not an evil guy. Just like most people in your life that fall into a pattern of trying to manipulate you, a lot of them are not bad people. They're not trying to live some kind of evil life. But in a crucial moment, Peter let his own desires overshadow God's plan. And that's why you and I need to be vigilant. Because people are people, and we're all broken. And we all have times, if we're not careful, that we let our desires become bigger in our life and our pursuit than God's plan. Sometimes even well-meaning people, those who care about us deeply, can unintentionally steer us away from our purpose. And maybe they try to guilt us or to isolate us from others or to put pressure on us to meet needs we were never meant to fulfill. And maybe they do it with a good motivation. They really think clearly that they know what's best and they think they can see things you can't see. But that's why we need to be clear on our purpose. This is my lane. This is my purpose. This is the season of my life. This is what I'm about. And when someone, even someone with good intentions, tries to pull you off track, you've got to recognize it for what it is and reject the distraction. So what are we going to do this week and through the holidays as we deal with controlling people? Be clear on your purpose. Spot the strings before they're pulled. And finally, set your boundaries and stand firm. Set your boundaries and stand firm. Jesus turns to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Have you ever called anybody Satan? It doesn't go well. You're a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. You and I have to set boundaries and stand firm. It's exactly what Jesus did with Peter. So if you get in an argument with your spouse and you feel like you're trying to control me, you're trying to manipulate you, and they're starting to try to make you feel guilty, and this is your spouse, you just look at him and call him Satan. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you do, we have some great counseling ministries we can refer you to, but I would not recommend that. But think about this. In the exchange with Peter, what if Jesus' identity and self-worth had been wrapped up in Peter's opinion of him? What if he was more concerned about what Peter thought of him and how Peter felt about him rather than God's purpose for his life? His response would have been very different. "Oh, but Peter, calm down. I'll back off. Don't get upset. We're good. I won't do it." Peter's attitude was Jesus. What if it was Jesus? If you do this, I'm not going to hang out with you anymore. I'm going to lead you on red. I'm going to unfollow you on Instagram. We're going to disconnect. The moment you give control of your life and purpose to someone else, you remove God's control of your life. The moment you give control of your life and purpose to someone else, you remove God's control of your life and your purpose. And every single time you do that, it is always a downgrade. Doing that never elevates your life. When you begin to live for the opinions and the thoughts and the desires of someone else instead of God, it never makes you better. It always makes you worse. It's important to remember that not everyone close to you has your best interest in mind. And not everyone that's close to you has God's purpose for you in mind. And when it comes to your closest relationships, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your friends, your coworkers, your boss, your kids, are you creating healthy patterns or are you allowing unhealthy patterns? If you don't like what you have, change what you expect and accept. If you don't like what you have, change what you expect and change what you accept. Accept better. Decide you won't accept disrespect or anger. You won't accept harsh tones. It's interesting. If a toddler throws a fit, the worst thing you can do is give them what they want. You know that. If a toddler starts throwing a fit, and I've seen it in some of, who did I say this? In some of today's modern parenting. "Oh, are you upset? I am so sorry. Oh my gosh, you're on the floor. Let me lay down beside you and try to soothe you. What can we do? What can I buy you?" Shut the fat up. The last thing you do with an emotional terrorist is give them what they want. And we know that with toddlers. We know if a toddler's throwing a fit, don't give them what they want. But do you understand? There are adults that are emotionally toddlers. And the worst thing you can do for an adult throwing a fit is give them what they want. You reinforce the behavior. You tell them this is the outcome. Your desired outcome is what's going to happen when you throw a fit. You've got to set your boundaries and stand firm. I love you. I love you, but I won't let you threaten me or bury me in guilt. I know you're hurting, and because I care, I'm not rescuing you this time. You've got to figure this out between you and Jesus, but no more. It is difficult with the people that we love to set boundaries. You know what's more difficult? To continue to live in dysfunction and just let it happen. You and I meet people all the time that say they love God, but they're not worried about His plan for your life, they're worried about theirs. We all meet people who are control freaks and want to play God in our lives. But here's the reality. I don't make a very good God, and neither do you. None of us make a very good God. Then Jesus said to His disciples, Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Control largely is an illusion. Because the reality is we control very little. This afternoon, the Cowboys play the Atlanta Falcons. And I have some huge desires, but I can't do a thing about it. If the Falcons win, my son-in-law needs to go somewhere for a while because he's a Falcons fan. But the reality is at the end of the day, but listen, you can't control tomorrow. You can't control what the people that you love deeply, the person that promised they'd love you forever, you can't control that. Your kids, you can have the best desires for their life. And listen, every parent carries that burden, that desire. And part of how we parent, it comes from a good place of wanting the best for our kids. But you can't control them. It never works. The more controlling you are, the more wheels off they will become. So what do we do? That makes life feel so unstable. That makes me feel so insecure unless you and I can't control anything. But we can have a deeply personal, intimate relationship with the one who's in control of everything. And when I live my life trusting him, when I live my life relying on him, leaning on him, exercising my faith, and choosing to believe what is contrary to what I feel sometimes, it provides incredible security, peace, and strength. When you follow Jesus, you're not in control, but he is, and that's good news. Would you pray with me this morning? Father, I'm so grateful that you love people that are messed up and broken like me. I'm so grateful that you know the issues that we deal with and you love us in spite of that. I'm so grateful, God, that your love for us is not transactional and we don't have to perform a certain way to keep and maintain your love, your focus, and your attention. Thank you for loving us unconditionally, no matter what. Thank you that we can trust you as we walk through this week, as we deal with things in life that we feel deeply and that deeply affect our lives, and we can't control them. Thank you that ultimately you are in control and we can trust you. With heads bowed and eyes closed, maybe you're here this morning, and the greatest thing you could do for you is to give up control. You're trying to control your life, but the greatest thing you can do for you is to give your life to Jesus, to invite him to come into your life, forgive your sin, give you a home in heaven after this life, give you his spirit to live inside you in this life. And I wonder in this moment, is there something inside you saying, that's what I need? That's the step I need to take. If that's the case, that's the Spirit of God saying, I love you. I want to know you personally. Life is always better when God's in control. And so I want to encourage you, if that's the step you need to take, you've never invited Jesus to come into your life, you know that's the step you need to take, would you pray a very simple prayer? I'd love to lead you in a prayer. You can pray it out loud or you can pray it in the quietness of this moment. The Bible says Jesus knows even our thoughts. But if you'd like to invite Jesus to come into your life, just pray this simple prayer. Dear God, I know that I need you. Jesus, please come into my life. Forgive my sin and help me to live for you. Thank you so much for loving me. As best I know how, I give you my life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for watching with us today. If you prayed that prayer, Pastor Byron would love to know so that he could be praying for you. If you want to text your name to 407-487-8311. We also want to thank you so much for your faithful generosity. If you'd like to give, you can go to givec3.cc. If you're in the Orlando area, we would love to see you on Sundays at 8:15, 9:45, and 11:15. Can't wait to see you there.